Kings get statues, kings get movies, kings get remembered. But some of the most terrifying, ruthless, and flat-out insane rulers in history? Women. We are talking queens who buried ambassadors alive, empresses who blinded their own sons, and a former prostitute who commanded 40,000 pirates and retired rich. These 33 women did not ask for power. They took it, and left a lot of bodies behind. 1. Let us start with Olga of Kiev, and honestly, we might as well start with the most terrifying revenge story in medieval history. When the Drevlians killed her husband Prince Igor in 945 AD, they thought they were being clever by sending ambassadors to propose that Olga marry their prince instead. Big mistake. Olga welcomed the first group of ambassadors warmly, then had them thrown into a trench and buried alive. She invited a second group, offered them a nice relaxing bath, and burned the bathhouse down with them inside. Still not satisfied, she threw a funeral feast for her husband, got the Drevlians drunk, and had her soldiers massacre 5,000 of them. And for the grand finale, she asked the surviving city for tribute. Just 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each house. Seemed weird, but okay. Then she tied burning materials to the birds and released them. The birds flew home. Every single house in the city caught fire simultaneously. Olga later became a saint, a literal saint. 2. Caterina Sforza was a 15th century Italian noblewoman, and she had exactly 0 patience for threats. When her enemies captured her children and held them hostage outside her fortress walls, demanding she surrender or they would kill the kids, most people would have panicked. Caterina climbed up onto the fortress walls where everyone could see her, lifted her skirt, and screamed something that roughly translates to, "Do it! I have the equipment to make more!" The attackers were so shocked they did not know how to respond. She called their bluff in the most aggressive way humanly possible, and it worked. Her children survived, by the way. Caterina later personally defended her fortress against Cesare Borgia's army, fighting alongside her soldiers until she was captured. Even then, she tried to assassinate Cesare with poisoned letters. The woman simply did not know how to quit. 3. Qing Shi started her career in a floating brothel and ended it as the most successful pirate in recorded history. When pirate captain Zheng Yi proposed marriage, she negotiated equal share of his fleet as a wedding gift. Smart move. After he died, she took over completely and turned his scattered ships into a floating empire. At her peak, she commanded over 40,000 pirates across hundreds of ships. Her fleet was larger than many national navies. She defeated the Chinese Imperial Navy, the Portuguese Navy, and basically anyone else who tried to stop her. Her secret? Organization. She created a strict legal code for her pirates. Stealing from villagers who supplied you was punishable by death. Desertion meant your ears got cut off. When the Chinese government realized they could not beat her, they offered amnesty. She negotiated keeping her loot, her fleet, and her freedom. Qing Shi retired wealthy, opened a gambling house, and died peacefully in her bed at 69. The ultimate pirate success story. 4. Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba fought Portuguese colonizers in Angola for over 40 years, and she did it with style. During peace negotiations with the Portuguese governor in 1622, she arrived to find a power play waiting. There was only one chair in the room, and the governor was sitting in it. He wanted her to stand like a subordinate. Nzinga looked around, snapped her fingers, and one of her servants dropped to all fours. She sat on his back like he was furniture and conducted the entire negotiation from there. Equal seating achieved. She converted to Christianity to gain Portuguese alliance, then converted back when it suited her, then converted again. She personally led troops into battle well into her 60s. She formed alliances with Dutch traders, raided Portuguese settlements, and created a kingdom so strong it outlasted her by decades. The woman was a survivor and a strategist of the highest order. 5. Kutulan was a 13th century Mongolian princess who was also quite possibly the greatest wrestler in Mongol history. She was the great-great-granddaughter of Genghis Khan, and she decided that any man who wanted to marry her had to beat her in wrestling first. If he lost, he had to give her horses. A lot of men tried. a lot of men failed. According to legend, she accumulated 10,000 horses and exactly 0 husbands through this arrangement. Her father loved it, because honestly, who needs a son-in-law when you have a daughter who can wrestle enemy soldiers off their horses in actual battle? Which she did, repeatedly. Marco Polo supposedly witnessed her in combat, charging into enemy lines and snatching up prisoners like they weighed nothing. She eventually did marry, probably for political reasons, but she chose someone herself. No wrestling required. He must have been special. 6. Wu Zetian remains the only woman in Chinese history to officially rule as emperor in her own right. Not empress consort, not regent, but emperor. And her path to that throne makes Game of Thrones look like a children's story. She entered the imperial palace as a low-ranking concubine at 14. When the old emperor died, she should have been sent to a Buddhist monastery forever. Instead, she caught the eye of the new emperor. Rumors say she strangled her own newborn daughter and framed the empress for the murder to get her rival eliminated. Those rumors might be political propaganda, but the fact that everyone believed she was capable of it says something. She established a secret police network, encouraged informants, and eliminated anyone who opposed her rise. When she finally took the throne at age 67, she ruled for 15 years and actually did a pretty good job. Expanded the empire, reformed the examination system, promoted based on merit. Terrifying and competent. 7. Tomyris was queen of the Massagetæ, a nomadic warrior people in Central Asia, and she handed Cyrus the Great his final defeat. Cyrus had conquered Babylon, Lydia, and most of the known world. He figured the Massagetæ would be easy. He was catastrophically wrong. First, he tried trickery. Left a camp full of wine for the Massagetæ warriors to find, got them drunk, then slaughtered them and captured Tomyris' son. Her son killed himself in captivity. Tomyris sent Cyrus a message promising to give him more blood than he could drink. She delivered. In the battle that followed, Cyrus was killed. According to Herodotus, Tomyris found his body, cut off his head, and dunked it into a wineskin filled with human blood. "You wanted blood your whole life," she supposedly said. "Now drink your fill." One of the greatest conquerors in history ended by a grieving mother with a point to prove. 8. Hatshepsut ruled Egypt for over 20 years, and she did it by essentially telling everyone she was a man. Not because she was confused about her gender, but because Pharaoh was a male role with male titles and male imagery, and she wanted the full package. So she wore the ceremonial false beard, used male pronouns in official inscriptions, and had herself depicted with a male body in statues. She called herself king, not queen, and she was phenomenally successful. Massive building projects, expanded trade networks, a period of peace and prosperity. When she died, her stepson Thutmose III eventually tried to erase her from history, chiseling her name off monuments and destroying her statues. Historians used to think this was immediate revenge, but now we believe he waited 20 years before doing it. Probably political necessity rather than personal hatred. Either way, he failed. We remember her. We barely remember him. 9. Boudica was queen of the Iceni tribe in Britain, and Rome made a terrible mistake when they decided to humiliate her. After her husband died, the Romans ignored his will, seized Iceni lands, had Boudica publicly flogged, and assaulted her daughters. In response, she raised an army of approximately 100,000 furious Britons and went on an absolute rampage. She burned Camulodunum, modern Colchester, to the ground. Then she did the same to Londinium, which is now London. Then Verulamium. Archaeological evidence still shows a layer of burned red ash from her fires. Roman historians claim 70 to 80,000 people died. The numbers might be exaggerated, but the destruction was real. Eventually, Rome sent enough legions to crush her rebellion, but Boudica chose death over capture. She poisoned herself rather than be paraded through Rome in chains. Her statue now stands in London, right next to the parliament she burned down 2,000 years ago. 10. Kandake Amanirenas was a one-eyed warrior queen of the Kingdom of Kush, in what is now Sudan, and she made Rome pay for underestimating her. When the Romans conquered Egypt in 30 BC, they assumed the southern border was secure. Amanirenas disagreed. She launched a surprise attack, captured several Roman forts, and grabbed bronze statues of Emperor Augustus himself as trophies. The Romans sent a counterattack. Amanirenas fought them personally, despite losing an eye in battle. The war dragged on for years until Rome decided it was not worth the trouble and negotiated peace. Amanirenas got favorable terms and kept her kingdom independent. But here is the best part. One of those bronze heads of Augustus? She buried it under the steps of a temple to a Nubian victory god. Every person entering that temple would step on the Roman emperor's face. Archaeologists found it there in 1910. She got the last laugh for 2,000 years. 11. Matilda of Tuscany was so powerful that she forced a Holy Roman Emperor to perform one of the most humiliating acts of submission in medieval history. The year was 1077, and Emperor Henry IV had been excommunicated by Pope Gregory VII. This was a political disaster. His nobles were abandoning him. His enemies were circling. Henry needed the Pope's forgiveness. The Pope was staying at Matilda's castle in Canossa. So Henry came to beg. Matilda and the Pope made him wait. For 3 days in January, in the Italian Alps, Emperor Henry IV stood barefoot in the snow outside the castle gates, wearing rough penitent's clothing, waiting for an audience. 3 days of a Holy Roman Emperor freezing and begging at a woman's door. Finally, they let him in, and the Pope forgave him. Matilda remained a papal ally and military commander until her death at 69, still wearing armor and leading troops. 12. Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi became a symbol of Indian resistance against British colonization, and the way she died in battle became legendary. When the British refused to recognize her adopted son as heir and tried to annex her kingdom in 1857, she joined the Great Rebellion. But she did not just inspire troops from behind the lines. She led cavalry charges personally. According to accounts, she rode into battle with her infant son strapped to her back, reins clenched between her teeth, wielding a sword in each hand. This might be embellished, but what is documented is that she was an exceptional horsewoman and fighter who trained troops and commanded respect. She died in combat at around 30 years old, possibly shot while charging British positions. A British general who fought against her later wrote that she was the most dangerous of all the rebel leaders. The British meant it as a warning. Indians took it as the highest compliment. 13. Fredegund started as a servant girl and ended as one of the most feared queens in Merovingian France, leaving a body count that would make any assassin jealous. She caught the eye of King Chilperic I and systematically eliminated everyone between her and power. His first wife was strangled. His second wife, Galsvintha, was found murdered in bed shortly after Fredegund became the royal mistress. Coincidence? Nobody believed that then either. She became queen, and the killings continued. She sent assassins after rival kings, bishops, and even her own stepsons when they threatened her children's inheritance. 2 stepsons died under suspicious circumstances. She allegedly tried to assassinate her own daughter when they argued. She started a brutal war against her sister-in-law Brunhilde that lasted decades and killed thousands. When Chilperic was murdered, some historians suspect Fredegund was involved. She outlived him by 12 years and died peacefully, never facing justice for any of it. 14. Empress Maud, also called Matilda, pulled off one of the most cinematic escapes in medieval history during the English Civil War known as the Anarchy. She was fighting her cousin Stephen for the English throne, and in 1142, she found herself trapped in Oxford Castle during a brutal winter siege. Stephen's forces surrounded the castle completely. Food was running out. Surrender seemed inevitable. Then, one December night, Maud and 3 knights slipped out through a small gate. But here is the genius part. She dressed entirely in white. White cloaks against the snow, crossing the frozen river, walking right through the enemy lines. Nobody saw them. They traveled on foot for miles through the snow to safety in Wallingford. She never became queen herself, but she fought long enough to ensure her son Henry became King Henry II. The anarchy ended. Her bloodline won. Sometimes survival is victory. 15. Lady Trieu, or Trieu Thi, led an uprising against Chinese occupation of Vietnam in the 3rd century AD, and her attitude was absolutely magnificent. When her brother suggested she should just get married and live quietly like a proper woman, she responded with what might be the greatest rejection of domestic life ever recorded. She said she wanted to ride the strong winds, trample the fierce waves, kill the whales of the Eastern Sea, and drive out foreign invaders. She absolutely refused to bow her head as a servant and be a slave to any man. She reportedly went into battle riding a war elephant, wearing golden armor, and commanded her troops with complete authority. The rebellion eventually failed against the might of the Chinese Wu Kingdom, but she chose suicide over capture at around 23 years old. Vietnam remembers her as a national hero to this day. Streets, schools, and districts bear her name. 16. Irene of Athens became the first woman to rule the Byzantine Empire in her own right, and the price was her own son's eyes. She started as regent for her young son Constantine VI, but she liked power too much to share it. When Constantine came of age and started ruling independently, mother and son struggled for control. The conflict escalated until 797, when Irene made her decision. She had Constantine seized, dragged into the purple imperial chamber where he had been born, and blinded. The blinding was so severe that he likely died from it, though officially he just disappeared from history. Irene then ruled alone for 5 years, the first woman to use the title Basileus, emperor rather than empress. She even received a marriage proposal from Charlemagne that could have united Eastern and Western Christendom. She refused. Eventually, she was overthrown and exiled, dying alone on the island of Lesbos. But she made history, even if the cost was unthinkable. 17. Nur Jahan was the real power behind the Mughal Empire, while her husband Emperor Jahangir was busy with wine and opium. And she was not subtle about it. She issued imperial orders under her own name, had coins struck with her image, and was addressed as Padshah Begum, essentially female emperor. She once killed 4 tigers with 6 shots during a royal hunt while mounted on an elephant. Jahangir was so impressed he showered her with diamonds. She was the only Mughal empress ever to have coins minted in her name while her husband was alive. When rivals tried to kidnap her and Jahangir during a coup attempt, she organized the defense herself. She designed buildings, patronized arts, traded internationally, and essentially ran a massive empire for years. When Jahangir died, her power ended because her stepson Shah Jahan, who built the Taj Mahal, took the throne and sidelined her. She spent her remaining years quietly, but for 2 decades, she was arguably the most powerful woman in the world. 18. Zenobia of Palmyra looked at the Roman Empire, the greatest military power the ancient world had ever known, and decided she could take it. Her husband was a Roman client king in Syria. When he was assassinated, she took power as regent for her young son and immediately started expanding. She conquered Egypt. She took most of Asia Minor. She declared independence from Rome and started minting her own coins, showing herself as Augusta, Empress. For a few years in the 270s AD, her Palmyrene Empire controlled Rome's entire eastern grain supply. Emperor Aurelian had to personally lead his legions across the empire to stop her. It took 2 major battles and a siege of Palmyra itself before she was captured. The Romans expected her to be executed or commit suicide like Cleopatra. Instead, Aurelian reportedly gave her a villa in Rome where she lived out her days as a Roman matron. Some queens die fighting. Zenobia negotiated retirement. 19. Queen Himiko ruled ancient Japan in the 3rd century AD, and everything about her reign was deliberately mysterious. According to Chinese records, she lived in a heavily guarded palace fortress, attended by 1,000 female servants. Only one man was allowed to bring her food and communicate her words to the outside world. She never married. She was described as a shaman queen who bewitched the people through her mastery of magic and spiritual rituals. Japan at the time was recovering from decades of civil war, and somehow this mysterious priestess queen managed to unite multiple warring kingdoms under her rule. She sent diplomatic missions to China and was recognized as a legitimate ruler by the Chinese emperor. When she died, over 100 attendants were buried with her, according to the records. Her tomb has never been definitively found. After nearly 2,000 years, Himiko remains exactly as mysterious as she apparently intended to be. 20. Isabella of France earned her nickname the She-Wolf through one of the most dramatic coups in English history. She was married to King Edward II, who was more interested in his male favorites than in her. After years of humiliation, she was sent to France on a diplomatic mission. She refused to come back. Instead, she began an affair with an exiled English baron named Roger Mortimer, gathered an army, and invaded England to remove her own husband from the throne. The invasion succeeded almost immediately. Edward's allies abandoned him, he fled, and he was captured. Isabella and Mortimer forced him to abdicate in favor of her son, who became Edward III. What happened to Edward II in prison remains disputed, but he died there, possibly murdered in a particularly gruesome way. Isabella ruled as regent until her son grew up, took power, and executed Mortimer. Isabella herself lived another 28 years in comfortable retirement. The She-Wolf survived. 21. Kosum Sultan was the most powerful woman in Ottoman history, and her death was as violent as her life. She was a Greek girl captured and sold into the imperial harem, who rose through charm and intelligence to become the favorite of Sultan Ahmed I. She bore him multiple sons and advised him on state matters. When Ahmed died, she became the power behind the throne for a succession of sultans, her sons, then her grandsons. For decades, nothing important happened in the Ottoman Empire without her approval. But in 1651, her rivalry with another ambitious woman, her grandson's mother, Turhan Sultan, reached a breaking point. Kosum allegedly plotted to replace her grandson with a more controllable sultan. Turhan found out. Assassins were sent to Kosum's chambers. According to various accounts, she tried to hide, was dragged out, and was strangled with a curtain cord by the chief executioner. She was in her 60s, and she fought them until the end. 22. Ethelflaed, Lady of the Mercians, was the daughter of Alfred the Great, and she might have been an even better military commander than her famous father. When her husband, the Lord of Mercia, became too sick to rule, she took over completely. And she did not just maintain territory, she expanded it. She personally planned and oversaw the construction of a network of fortified towns called burhs, strategic strongholds designed to resist Viking attacks. Then she used them as bases to go on the offensive. She captured Derby, she captured Leicester. Viking armies that had terrorized England for generations started losing ground. When she died in 918 AD, she was preparing to take York and might have united all of England herself. Instead, her brother Edward took over and got the credit. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, written by men, barely mentions her. But the Vikings remembered who had beaten them. 23. Queen Nanny of the Maroons led a community of escaped slaves in the mountains of Jamaica against British colonial forces for decades, and the British never defeated her. The Maroons were Africans who had escaped slavery and built independent communities in Jamaica's interior. Nanny became their most famous leader in the early 1700s. She was a master of guerrilla warfare, using Jamaica's rugged terrain to set ambushes and traps that decimated British troops. Soldiers sent into the mountains often never came back. British reports from the time describe her almost superstitiously, attributing magical powers to her because they could not explain how she kept winning. In 1740, the British finally gave up and signed a peace treaty, recognizing Maroon territory as autonomous and free. Nanny is now a national hero of Jamaica and appears on the Jamaican $500 bill, the only woman among Jamaica's 7 national heroes. 24. Hurrem Sultan, born Roxolana, broke every rule of the Ottoman harem and got away with all of it. She was captured somewhere in Eastern Europe, probably from modern Ukraine, and sold as a slave to the Ottoman court. She caught the eye of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, became his favorite concubine, and then did something unprecedented. She convinced him to legally marry her. Ottoman sultans did not marry. The whole point of the harem system was to avoid the political complications of official wives. Suleiman married her anyway. She convinced him to free her from slavery. She bore him multiple children and remained his sole companion for the rest of his life, abandoning the tradition of sultans rotating between multiple concubines. She influenced appointments, corresponded with foreign rulers, built mosques and charitable institutions. When she died, Suleiman was devastated. She transformed herself from the absolute bottom of society to the second most powerful person in one of history's greatest empires. 25. Lady Six Sky was a 7th century Maya queen who single-handedly rebuilt a defeated kingdom into a regional power. The city of Naranjo had been crushed by a rival city and was essentially a vassal state. Then Lady Six Sky arrived from another powerful city, probably as part of a diplomatic arrangement. Within a few years, she had transformed everything. She conducted rituals normally reserved for male rulers. She organized military campaigns that conquered neighboring cities. Stone monuments from her reign show her standing on bound captives, the ultimate symbol of martial dominance in Maya art. One monument shows her performing a ritual scattering while standing on a prisoner from the city that had once dominated Naranjo. The message was clear: complete reversal of power. Her son technically became king, but the monuments continued to emphasize her role. She ruled for decades, and Naranjo remained powerful long after her death. 26. Margaret of Anjou became the real leader of the Lancastrian faction during the Wars of the Roses because her husband King Henry VI kept going insane. Literally. He would fall into catatonic states for months at a time, completely unresponsive. Someone had to hold the Lancastrian cause together, and that someone was Margaret. She raised armies, negotiated with foreign powers, plotted strategy, and personally lobbied nobles for support. When the Yorkists seemed unstoppable, she fled to Scotland and then to France, never stopping her campaign to restore her husband and son. She convinced King Louis XI of France to support her, landed back in England with an army, and kept fighting until the final Lancastrian defeat at Tewkesbury in 1471, where her son was killed. She was captured and eventually ransomed back to France, where she died in poverty. She lost everything, but nobody could say she did not fight for it. 27. Jadwiga of Poland was crowned king, not queen, because in medieval Poland the monarch was defined as male regardless of the actual person holding the position. She was around 10 to 12 years old when she became King Jadwiga in 1384, making her one of the youngest monarchs in European history. But she was not just a symbolic figurehead. She was educated, politically astute, and deeply involved in governance. Her most significant act was agreeing to marry Jogaila, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, creating a personal union between Poland and Lithuania that would last for centuries and create one of Europe's largest states. She also founded the renovation of Krakow University, today called Jagiellonian University, one of Europe's oldest. She died at only 25, probably from childbirth complications, but in that short life she shaped Central European politics for centuries. The Catholic Church beatified her in 1997 and canonized her in 1997. 28. Idia was the mother of Esigi, a 16th century Oba, or king, of the Benin Empire in what is now Nigeria. When Esigi faced a major war against the neighboring Igala people, Idia did not just pray for his success. According to tradition, she was a skilled healer and herbalist who prepared mystical medicines to protect her son's warriors. She also raised her own troops and may have fought alongside them. Her importance was so recognized that Esigi created a new title for her, Ioba, meaning Queen Mother, with her own palace and significant political power. The most famous artistic legacy of Benin is probably the ivory mask depicting Idia, carved in her honor. It shows a serene face, crowned with an elaborate headdress of Portuguese figures, representing Benin's trade relationships. When Nigeria became independent, they adopted this mask as a national symbol. In 1977, it became the symbol of an entire African cultural festival. One Queen Mother, remembered forever in ivory. 29. Catherine the Great was a minor German princess who arrived in Russia as a teenage bride, learned the language, converted to Orthodox Christianity, and eventually overthrew her own husband to become empress. Her husband, Peter III, was widely considered incompetent and possibly mentally unstable. He openly admired Frederick the Great of Prussia, Russia's enemy, and seemed to have no interest in actually governing. Catherine had no intention of going down with his ship. In 1762, with support from the Imperial Guard, she staged a coup. Peter abdicated and died mysteriously a few days later. Catherine ruled Russia for 34 years, expanding the empire enormously, modernizing administration, patronizing arts and philosophy, and corresponding with Enlightenment thinkers across Europe. Yes, there are scandalous stories about her personal life, most of them invented by enemies. The reality was impressive enough. A foreign woman who became one of Russia's greatest rulers through intelligence, charm, and absolute ruthlessness when required. 30. Tamar the Great of Georgia was so respected that she used the title King of Kings, not Queen. She ruled from 1184 to 1213, and under her leadership, Georgia reached its absolute peak of power and cultural achievement. She expanded Georgian territory significantly, her armies winning victories against the Seljuk Turks and other rivals. She supported the restoration of the Byzantine Komnenos dynasty in Trebizond. The period of her reign is called Georgia's Golden Age. Literature, architecture, and arts flourished under her patronage. The great poet Shota Rustaveli wrote his masterpiece, The Knight in the Panther's Skin, at her court, probably dedicated to her. She managed complex relationships with neighboring powers and with the Georgian nobility, balancing religious authority with political demands. When she died, she was mourned as the greatest ruler in Georgian history. Over 800 years later, that assessment has not really changed. 31. Isabella I of Castile transformed Spain from a collection of squabbling kingdoms into a world power, and she did it through fire, iron, and gold. Together with her husband Ferdinand of Aragon, she completed the Reconquista, the centuries-long campaign, to drive Muslim rulers out of the Iberian Peninsula. Granada fell in 1492. The same year, she funded Christopher Columbus's voyage that discovered the Americas. She also established the Spanish Inquisition, which persecuted Jews, Muslims, and suspected heretics with torture and burning. She expelled Jews from Spain entirely if they refused to convert. Her reign created the foundations of the Spanish Empire that would dominate Europe and the Americas for the next 2 centuries. She was brilliant, determined, devout to the point of fanaticism, and absolutely convinced of her divine mission. History calls her Isabella the Catholic. Whether that was praise or warning depends on your perspective. 32. Cleopatra has been reduced by popular culture to a seductress who bathed in milk and killed herself with a snake. The real Cleopatra was far more interesting. She was a polyglot who reportedly spoke 9 languages, the first Ptolemaic ruler in nearly 300 years who actually bothered to learn Egyptian. She commanded fleets and armies, personally led naval forces at the Battle of Actium, and nearly succeeded in playing Rome's civil wars to her advantage. She allied with Julius Caesar, had his son, then allied with Mark Antony, and had 3 more children. Her goal was always to preserve Egyptian independence and possibly expand her realm. She almost pulled it off. If Antony had won at Actium, she might have become the power behind the Roman throne. Instead, Octavian won, and she chose suicide over being paraded through Rome as a trophy. Her death ended the Ptolemaic dynasty and 3,000 years of Egyptian pharaohs. 33. Elizabeth I ruled England for 45 years and turned a second-rate island kingdom into a major European power. She survived a childhood where she was declared illegitimate. Her mother was executed, and she was constantly under suspicion of treason. She never married, using her single status as a diplomatic tool for decades, dangling the possibility of marriage alliances without ever committing. When the Spanish Armada, the greatest naval invasion force ever assembled, came to conquer England in 1588, she went to rally her troops at Tilbury. There, she delivered one of history's most famous speeches. "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too." The Armada was destroyed by storms and English ships. Elizabeth died in 1603, childless but triumphant. She had outlasted every enemy, and she did it entirely on her own terms. 33 women. 0 apologies. Now I need to know, you have to pick one of these queens as your enemy. She is coming for you with everything she has. Who are you choosing and why? Drop your answer below. Hit subscribe if you want more history that hits different, and smash like if any of these queens made your jaw drop. See you next time.